C. 392745, State of Nevada versus Manuel Diaz-Ruiz. The record reflect that Mr. Ruiz is present in custody. Mr. Lopez de Grady is here on his behalf. Ms. Mercer and Mr. Pesci are here on behalf of the state. This is the date and time set for the defendant's motion for reasonable bail. I have read the motion. I've read the opposition. Mr. Lopez de Grady, do you have anything you want to add to your moving papers?
Yes, Your Honor. I appreciate the opportunity. Just a couple of points to respond to the state's opposition. I think when you look at the evidence in this case, especially obviously the video, let's talk about what it doesn't show, right? The absence of evidence can be just as informative as the evidence that's actually in the case. And if we were talking about a premeditated first-degree murder here, you could have seen Mr. Ruiz walking straight up to the Finleys while they were there on the strip and locked and loaded, go ahead and shoot them right then and there. He had the perfect opportunity to do that. If that was truly his design that day, that didn't happen. Okay, he walks past them, so maybe he didn't see them. But at some point, he does see them, right? The state makes a big point about him returning and engaging with them again. At that point, Mr. Ruiz didn't simply notice that they were there. When they weren't looking, go ahead and shoot them behind them. He didn't do that either. And that could be evident proof for a great presumption that there was a first-degree murder. But as I said, that's not the evidence that we have here. Instead, we have no violence occurring in this case until there's an actual confrontation. And the whole issue here is, what is this confrontation about? The state likes to characterize it as a type of re-engaging, that Mr. Ruiz went back and re-engaged Ms. Finley. But if you look at it, the video shows that it looks like Ms. Finley is actually corralling Mr. Ruiz back into frame and back towards Mr. Finley. If you listen to the video, around 15 to 16 seconds into the exhibit that the state attached, you can hear Ms. Finley saying something to the effect of, "Get your ass over here." That's in the facts. And then you also see her getting in Mr. Ruiz's face at that point. There's already this confrontation and it's a charged environment. And even then, even at that point, even though he's carrying a weapon at that point, he doesn't shoot. He doesn't shoot Ms. Finley. He doesn't shoot Mr. Finley right away when she is getting in his face. At that point then, you see the video and there's some movement. It looks like there's actual jockeying between Ms. Finley and Mr. Ruiz where she's getting in his face. But it's only after Mr. Finley basically steps to Mr. Ruiz saying, "What up, cuz?" And you can hear that in the video around 18 to 19 seconds into the state's exhibit. And it's only because Mr. Ruiz saw Mr. Finley reaching towards his waistband, that at that point, you can hear in the video, Mr. Ruiz racks the gun, so it wasn't even preloaded, and then at that point, shoots. And that's exactly what distinguishes this type of situation from the case that the state cites in their moving papers, this U.S. v. Urena. I'll note for the record that's a Ninth Circuit case regarding a federal trial in California that did not involve Nevada law. But in that case, it had to do with, I think it was an altercation between two inmates. And one of them decided to attack the other because they insulted them. And so the court went on to say, no, you can't simply attack somebody for fighting words, that kind of thing. In this case, we have Mr. Ruiz seeing Mr. Finley reaching towards his waistband, making this hostile, "What up, cuz?" remark at him. And then in the back of Mr. Ruiz's mind, you have this history that we outlined in our moving papers regarding his post-traumatic stress disorder, where he was the victim of a brutal stabbing when he was a young man. But more importantly, and more to the point in this situation, we have the prior violent altercation between Mr. Ruiz and the Finleys, which is documented in the police report, where you see Mr. Ruiz actually reaching out to the authorities for help regarding this kind of situation. And so this is all happening in the back of Mr. Ruiz's mind in the split of a second, right? When he has this confrontation at him, and it's only at that point that Mr. Ruiz fires. And if you examine the injuries that Mr. Finley suffered, you can see that they are towards his wrist, towards his arm, and towards his forearm, consistent with him trying to stop him from reaching for something, right? And then as we noted, ultimately, Mr. Ruiz kept shooting because it seemed like Mr. Finley was not stopping, and ultimately laid a fatal shot. And then if we look at Ms. Finley, you actually have testimony from one of the state's witnesses at the grand jury proceeding, this Hansel Martinez, who talks about seeing a female go over near the fountain and grab something. And that's exactly what Mr. Ruiz was seeing regarding Ms. Finley. Another situation where he was in threat of his life, or in threat of great bodily injury, which is what Nevada law allows for in terms of a justified self-defense killing. You can use deadly force not only when it's actual danger, but when it's apparent danger. So when the state makes the argument that there were no weapons recovered at the scene, Nevada law does not simply say, well, you can't use self-defense in that situation. If it's apparent danger, you are allowed to use self-defense. Another point that I just want to respond to, the video that the state included, that video dates back to at least, and this is by the United States admission, at least 7 months before this incident. If you look at the video, it seems like there's some text overlaid on top of it, so it looks like it might have been reposted by somebody. So I'll just make the point that it's at least 7 months before. And so when we're talking about a premeditated design to ultimately take Mr. Finley and Ms. Finley's lives, that's a very attenuated connection, 7 months before. Not only that, we're talking about an online video, right, that is garnered for attention, but also done by Mr. Ruiz in that moment in character. He's wearing makeup, he's laughing, and he's clearly not being in any way serious. So I'd ask the court to take that into consideration, that it's not an actual threat. It's not in any way crucial evidence of premeditation. Obviously, Mr. Ruiz responded to the situation wrongly. He shouldn't have fled. He should have stayed behind, surrendered to police at that point, and faced the consequences. But that's exactly what he did when he was able to actually remove himself from the situation, which is shocking by any account. He remedied this grave lapse in judgment about fleeing by doing what? Turning himself in voluntarily. And that's why he's in custody now, because he realized that this is serious and that he needs to answer for this conduct. But in trying to assess his candidacy for bail, I'd ask the court to take that into consideration. And as we laid out, he has a clean criminal history, and he has a lot of support in the community. His family, or his wife, is present in court, as well as a bunch of supporters here in the front and the back 2 rows who are here with him. And so I'd ask the court to take that into consideration as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lopez. Is there any state?
Your Honor, it's the state's position that the proof is evident and the presumption is great in this case. There was a long-standing feud between these 2 parties. Approximately 6 months prior to the incident occurring is when when the defendant alleges that he was battered by Tanisha Finley with a selfie stick. He then, approximately a week later, posts the video in which he says something to the effect of, "If I catch you at a red light, Finny, pop, pop, pop." He clearly had a great degree of animosity towards these 2 people. He, in fact, admitted to law enforcement that 2 months prior to the shooting occurring, he approached the Finleys while they were on Fremont Street and called Mr. Finley the P word, the P-U-S-S-Y word. He was continuously seeking out confrontations with these individuals. And when you watch the video that the state provided of the shooting itself, it does not appear that that was a chance encounter. He, yes, initially casually walks by, but is clearly aware that they're there. He then turns around and seeks out a confrontation with these 2 people. Tanisha Finley is in no way, shape, or form acting violently when she stands between the defendant and her husband. She's trying to protect her husband. She's trying to keep Mr. Ruiz away from her husband. And it's at that point that he then reaches around her and starts firing 5 separate rounds into her husband with her standing there watching. Mr. Lopez Negretti attempted to tell this court that the injuries to his arm were consistent with, I think he said it was consistent with Mr. Finley trying to grab something. It's actually consistent with him trying to shield himself from being shot in the face by the defendant. Then, after he fires 5 rounds into Mr. Finley, he then turns his attention to Tanisha Finley, who's standing there screaming in horror at the fact that she's just watched her husband be shot and killed, and fires 2 rounds into her head. His claim of self-defense is absolutely absurd, especially when you read his statement, because he repeatedly admits that he never once saw either one of them in possession of a weapon. He never tells the police that in these multiple encounters prior to the shooting, that he's ever seen them armed with a weapon. He knows that they're streamers. He knows that they're carrying video equipment with them. There's just absolutely no indication that this killing was done in self-defense, Your Honor. His conduct afterwards is also completely inconsistent with self-defense. He takes his phone, obviously, so he can't be tracked, or he leaves his phone with his wife, obviously, so he can't be tracked. And then he misdirects police because the first responding officer actually encountered him at the median on Las Vegas Boulevard and says, "Where did the shooter go?" And he points out a completely different person and gives them a bad description and then keeps running. He sheds his clothing, he sheds the gun, he catches an Uber down the strip and eventually leaves the area. He has 12 hours before he turns himself in to come up with this concocted self-defense claim. Of course, indulgence. It is the state's position, Your Honor, that even if you were to accept the defendant's claim of self-defense, it's obviously not, it would obviously be an imperfect self-defense claim, which is secondary murder with use. And when you look at Tanisha Finley, that becomes a first, because he has had plenty of time to premeditate, act willfully, and deliberately at that point. And with that, I'll submit it.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mercer. Mr. Lopez, ready?
Just one point, Your Honor. This wasn't concocted. I don't know how you can concoct a prior incident where Mr. Ruiz actually recurred to authorities, right? And we provided the police report that he filed, right? And this was months before, or actually even more than that. And again, the confrontation at that point was violent by the Finleys towards Mr. Ruiz. So it's only them that introduced the violence into the equation. And that's what was in the back of Mr. Ruiz's mind when, again, he encountered them and they had this confrontation. So I'd ask the court to just reinforce that.
All right, well, the court is going to rewatch the video and I will issue a written decision this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Okay?
CCD session, that's it.
So I'm gonna let you, now let's take out one of the,
Let's just be real, right? Dude messed up his whole life. For what? What point did he prove by taking them people's lives and now he's begging for his life, saying self-defense? And the courts ain't going for that at all. You went there with the intention to take them people's life. They ain't have no strap, no nothing. You know what I'm saying? So, and this is what I be saying about these jokers that be online talking crazy. You don't want to be sitting there like this, standing there looking crazy. And I'm just being real. You don't want to be standing there in that situation. Now you got to fight and try to beg to see if you can find a way to make the court believe something that it wasn't, to try to get through the situation. Man, this dude is cooked. Messed his whole life up trying to be a so-called gangster. When this is what happens. This is the outcome. You know? Yeah. And he gonna suffer. And now you got to think about that one moment for the rest of your life every day why you can't be free. So, you know, he did it to himself. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, dudes like that, you know, you deserve to get what you're going to get. You know, you deserve it. You know, no leniency or nothing. Yeah, he did this shit in front of everybody on the strip. He did this in front of everybody on the strip. It's people that ain't going to never forget about what they seen out there. And then you destroyed 2 people in their families' lives for nothing. Over some internet words because you wanted to prove something For who? Like, come on, man. Yeah, that shit be crazy, man. That shit be crazy, man. But he gonna feel this one. You know, he in there sick now. Yeah, everybody talk that tough guy stuff until, you know, they in a situation. You know what I mean? So, you know, when dudes be talking that shit on the internet, man, go ahead. You don't want to go to jail. You know, you don't want to go sit in jail. Yeah. You don't want to be the one sitting in jail sick. Everybody else enjoying life. You know, because when you go to jail, life still go on for everybody else. People still get to do what they do. You know, you the one that got to sit there. Don't nobody life stop because you go to jail. You the one that got to sit there and think about it while other people get to enjoy their life. So, yeah. And you can't even say, oh, he made a mistake. Nah, you did something intentional. You had intentions on doing what you're doing. You knew you had your mind made up and you went there and did some stupid stuff. Straight up. You know what I'm saying? And you know what happens, right? When you in jail, it's other people that got a temper as well. And it's other people that they on that too. And it's always somebody in there that's better than you. You know, when you out in the free world and you want to display, you know, those type of actions towards people and you got a temper to people that ain't on that level, you know, your energy is way above those people and you feel like you superior. When you in jail, a lot of these niggas that be like tough on the street, when they go to jail, they be humble because you run into somebody that's really on that. And they with all the shits. So that cocky temper that you had on the street, now you got to humble yourself and think, damn, you got somebody that's matching your energy, that's willing to take it to the limit, that's willing to go all the way there with you. You know what I mean? So it ain't never worth it, man. Yeah, Bull played himself and he gonna get what he deserved. You know, put himself in that situation. See how he gonna get up out of it. You know, put yourself in that situation. Now you trying to say self-defense. They not going for that shit. Nothing out there proved that you was, you know, doing self-defense. Everything out there proved that you was the aggressor. You know what I mean? And yeah, his public defender, you know, his job is to fight for him. You know, he got to fight for him the best he can because that's his job. And if he don't, he can have an appeal issue. So the public defender going to fight as hard as he can to try to get him, you know, whatever he can, if it's a plea, you know, but to make it look like he was there for him, because if not, the Bull can file an appeal for ineffective assistance to counsel. Yeah, my lawyer didn't do this, my lawyer didn't do that, and try to get back in court. You know, but the shit don't never pay off. You know, the shit don't never pay off, man. You know, all that tough guy shit, man. Yeah, man. Niggas don't be wanting what come with the streets. That's the bottom line, though. That's the bottom line. Everybody's tough, but don't nobody want what come with the street. You know, I understand, you know, in life, some people grow up in certain circumstances, so they got to deal with the circumstances that they in. But, you know, as you get older, you got to mentally elevate and mature, understand. Nigga, you really don't want what come with that. Running around with that gangster mentality, nigga don't want that shit. You think you want to sit there in a cell for the rest of your life with another nigga? Nah.